I got some requests to talk about my torrent setup in a previous video, so I want to do that. I suppose I should explain what torrents actually are for all you Zoomers who don't actually know, but there are a bunch of little pieces that go into my torrent setup that make it useful. Not just the programs I use, but my little status bar icon up here, having my maps entries so you can click on a torrent and automatically start downloading it. Finishing scripts to run at the end of once you finish downloading a torrent, a bunch of stuff that I want to talk about. So I'm gonna try and throw it all in one video just to do it. So anyway, so what are torrents for all you Zoomers who don't know? So torrents back in the day, especially back before digital rights management, if you wanted to get movies or music, you downloaded it with torrents, because if it was copyrighted you couldn't just download it off of nowhere. But torrents were a way of just sort of getting usually copyrighted stuff, not all the time, but a lot of times copyrighted music or movies. Now of course nowadays people mostly use them for Linux ISOs or something. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people started using Netflix and they're like, okay, the $5, that's fine, I'll just pay for that. But of course you can still use torrents for that. They're somewhat notorious for that, but you can pretty much, torrents are great for having any kind of mass downloading of files. Okay, now the BitTorrent architecture or protocol, I suppose, is decentralized, so you don't just download. If you download a movie, you don't just download it from one site. There are a bunch of people downloading it, and they're downloading pieces from different people, basically, including the other people who are actually downloading it. Okay, that's the general, in 10 seconds, explanation of what torrents are. So anyway, the program that is typically used on Linux is Transmission, and I actually really like it. There might be a better one, but this is what I use, and I can get a lot of cool stuff out of it. And again, my status icon, my the scripts I have run after a torrent is done downloading, all that kind of stuff, and I'll talk about all that. Now, I have Transmission CLI, which is just the command line interface, nothing else. You can get Transmission GTK or QT. If you don't know which is which, just get GTK, because if you have QT, you probably know it. Now, this is actually just a command line, a literal command to run stuff, and that's not really enough as far as I'm concerned to get everything you need. So I actually have, if I look at this, I gotta start spelling this thing right. I also have this program, and I highly recommend it if you want a command line interface, or a command line sort of terminal user interface. And it's Transmission Remote CLI Git. It's in the AUR. You might have to download it on GitHub if you don't have Arch though. So it looks something like, and this will give you an idea of what torrents are actually sort of doing. It looks like, oops, not typing things right today. It looks something like this. So here are all the torrents that I currently have. I actually started some of these downloading with the hopes that they'd finish downloading while I was doing this video, but that might not be the case. So the idea is, when you download a torrent file, it's really just a file for connecting to other people who have torrent files, sort of. It's a simplified way of explaining it. But I'll show you my key bindings here. So the key bindings I have, now the reason I use the terminal interface is just because you have a bunch of nice key bindings and I don't have to use the mouse. So I can go into one of these with Vim keys. So I can go H and L to go left and right, J and K to go up and down. I can go into one of these. So this torrent has a whole lot of files. I can select one I want to download. Most of these I've turned off, but let's say I want this one. I can set it to normal priority and that'll start downloading or something like that. Now of course if you're using Transmission GTK or QT or some kind of graphical equivalent, it's more or less going to work the same way. You're going to have torrents, you're going to be able to open those and look at the files that are downloading and stuff like that. So it's nothing too difficult, but this program of course has all these great key bindings and you can check them out. But I'm not going to go too much into it because there's nothing really too complicated about Transmission Remote CLI. But I do want to talk about some of the other things that I think might vex people when they're starting to use torrents. Now first off, as I said, this right here, Transmission CLI, it's actually only a command line interface at the beginning, so you can run transmission, well the relevant command is actually transmission remote, okay, just that. And that'll list out all the actions that you can, perform. We really want to look at the man. Now, I basically never run this command, but if you want to write scripts involving your torrents, this is how you do it. So, for example, you can add torrents, you can remove torrents, stuff like that, all the things you expect. So here's one thing that'll get people, especially Arch Linux users or people who are running distributions that don't set every single thing up. One thing that might confuse you is, here, for example, I've pulled up the Debian website, and I can get a BitTorrent link here, so I can download Debian. Now, if I just click on one of these, here's what it does on my computer. It'll show up here, it'll say torrent added. Okay, so now that's popped up, and I can go to my transmission remote, and I can see that, oh, now it's here, it's going to start downloading. Okay. If you're on a minimal distribution, though, most of that stuff is not set up by default. You have to create a MyMap entry so that Firefox or whatever your browser knows what to do when it's dealing with a torrent file. So let me show you briefly how to do that. And all of this stuff is in my .files on GitHub. But if you open up config mymaps.list, here you can put in what you want your default applications to be for each kind of file. So for magnet links, which are basically links to torrent files, or BitTorrent links, I have it run this torrent profile. This torrent profile is something you have to set up, but again, it's super easy. I just have it, it's just an application named torrent, and it runs this little script here I've made, transadd. So let me check that out. What does that do? Well, what it does is, as you saw just a second ago when I ran that Debian thing, it gives me a notification that the torrent has been added after it adds that with transmission remote. So transmission remote, A for add, and then the URL of the file. This little line here is just to make sure that the transmission daemon is running, so it pgreps the process if it exists, and if it doesn't, it actually starts the daemon. So that's all that is. Okay, and all those files, they're on my GitHub. You can check those out. Okay, that's just to make things easier for people who use LARPs. So you can just click on any torrents, and they'll automatically start downloading. So it's provided you have transmission installed. I don't think it's actually installed default on my .files, but so the other thing you might want to check out is the transmission daemon settings, which are config transmission daemon settings.json. So this file, I should say, you shouldn't modify it while you're running transmission, because transmission will override it every time it quits. So you're going to want to quit out of transmission before you modify it. But it looks, it'll probably look something like this, provided you've already run it. Now, there are only a couple things I want to note in this file. One is a block list URL, and that is, so again, torrents have been mostly used in the past for, like downloading copyrighted material. So it's a good habit to have a block list, so you block the NSA or whatever. I mean, it's not knocked down, but it's just like sometimes if your ISP sees you torrenting, they just make assumptions about what you're torrenting, and they might send you a nagging email or something like that. So it's probably a good idea to have some kind of block list here, and you can go get this one that I have here if you want. I think I'll paste this in the video description. The other thing I have that's important as far as I'm concerned is this thing down here. So this, you can also give it a script to run every time you finish downloading a torrent. I like being notified whenever a torrent finishes downloading. So I have added this script tordone, which I just wrote, tordone. And basically all it does is it gives me a little notification, torrent name has completely downloaded. And there are a couple of different variables you can use here, of course, the torrent directory or the name or the hash or all this kind of stuff. So if you want to do other operations on it other than just giving you a notification, you can. I mean, you can also do stuff. I think one of the examples they give is you could send yourself an email. So let's say I want to send myself an email when this torrent is done. So I can say torrent name has finished downloading, and I'm going to echo that. If you're a Mutt user, if you used my Mutt wizard a second ago, you can just do something like torrent finished and send it to your email address. So now if I save this, it's going to send me a email with this content, this subject line over here, and this is going to be the content. It's just going to say that the torrent has finished downloading. Okay. That's all it's going to do. So you can customize things if you want to, add whatever you need. Now the last thing that I want to note that I use about transmit, or that I have, is this little daemon up here, or not daemon, status bar icon. I think I've mentioned this in a previous video, so I'll mention it again here because it, let me open it up. I think it's status bar and then torrent, yeah. So this is a nice little script I have. So basically what this is, and this actually illustrates the Chad piping we were doing a couple days ago, where I can run this command. Let me show you on another window. So I can run transmission remote and then L, and that'll give me a list of all the torrents that I have that are that are active, whether they're downloading or not. So what I do here to, I want to have this little list here of, this basically says there are 5 downloading torrents. There is one that's finished downloading. I also have other icons. So the stop sign is for torrents that I've stopped. The hourglass is for torrents that are waiting for seeds, or the seed torrent is the one, the sapling icon is the one that, is for seeding torrents or whatever. So I have, basically all this is I take this output from this command. For example, let me move it over to the same side so you can see it. I grep out only those with actual torrents, so I lose the headers. And then basically what I do here is I run a sed command that replaces, for example, every single line that has the word stopped on it with A. Every line with the word seeding on it with the word Z. You might wonder why I'm replacing them with letters, and that's so I can sort them in the order that I want, and then replace them with emojis. So I want, the stop sign to be first, therefore I give it capital A or something like that. But basically, I just have a sed command that replaces all this stuff with emojis, and those emojis appear as, basically numbering this stuff up. So I sort them. I then use unique, and unique with the C option. That would make, so in this case, this is the 5 downloading torrents. That's originally 5 lines, but if you run unique and C on it, it actually just gives you one example of that and gives you the number 5. That's what that actually is. So this command here actually gives me this entire gives me all this information about torrents without having to look through a bunch of files or look through a whole bunch of output. It just makes things a lot simpler. So I think that's about it. Again, this video has just been sort of touching on random things about torrent usage, but that's the kind of stuff that I usually do. I do have a couple binds in my system for auto starting or auto quitting. I might have done it before, but I have a binding to toggle transmission, so that's td toggle. I think these are actually in my dot files, so you can check them out. But there's nothing really too complicated. I just encourage you to check it out, and maybe this is giving you some ideas for your torrent setup. But that's about it, and I will see you guys next time.